Hello and welcome to Everyday Lessons Every Day. I'm David McBee. Based on my book by the same name, this podcast is for those of us who believe in personal growth and want to improve every day. This is episode 21, Stepping in Dog Stuff. Good title. I listen to audiobooks when I mow. And a couple of weeks ago, the funniest thing happened when I was listening to Kevin Hart's audiobook, The Decision, while I was mowing. I was doing my thing, making the yard look all pretty with those fancy diagonal stripes that I love to admire from my deck, when I stepped in dog stuff. Now, you know what I mean by dog stuff, right? I'm not talking about collars and dog beds and bones and chew toys, not that kind of dog stuff. I'm talking about that stinky stuff that they do, seemingly 11 times a day, all over my beautiful green grass and sometimes on the deck and patio. Seriously? My little sheepadoodle has this aversion to grass when it's wet and will do her thing in the weirdest places. The other day, I swear she stopped and squatted halfway down the stairs. Who pees on the stairs? Anyway, me stepping in dog stuff isn't the funny part. I mean, now it's kind of funny, and it'll be funnier here in a minute when I tell you what else happened, but in that moment, I was mad. I had just asked Zoe to pick up all the dog stuff before I mowed, and she missed a handful of piles. Balancing my frustration with her incomplete work, my don't sweat the small stuff mantra, and remembering that even when I pick up the dog stuff before mowing, I miss a pile here and there too, I tried not to make a big deal out of it. Still, it was annoying. It was stinky and slippery, and because I had stepped in it, there was no way to pick it up cleanly from the grass, meaning that I could probably count on a brown spot in the yard. And let's not forget the joy of smelling the dog stuff for the next 15 minutes as I finished mowing. Okay, enough of that. You're probably over my description and wondering when I'm going to get to the everyday lesson portion of my story. So here you go. A few minutes after all this happened, I was listening to Kevin spouting his words of wisdom, or as he likes to call them, crispy golden nuggets, when he said, "Stepping in stuff," he didn't say stuff, but you get the idea. "Stepping in stuff is only bad if you don't wipe it off." Think about it. Tracking stuff gives you the smell that you don't want, but catching that smell and getting it off puts you in a positive place and makes you feel like you are stuff-free. Okay, Kevin Hart impersonation aside, that is some solid advice, right? Stuff happens. It happens every day. We can't control it, and we can't keep it from happening. The only thing we can do is decide how we're going to handle the stuff that comes our way. Are we going to let the stink of negative stuff bother us, or are we going to wipe it off and get back to a positive place? Your boss scolds you for making a mistake. Right or wrong, you have to decide if that's going to ruin your day or if it's just a brief negative moment in an otherwise fine day. Your games get rained out. You have to decide if you're going to be disappointed all weekend or if you're going to shake it off and find something else fun to do. You do poorly on a test. You have to decide if that means the beginning of a downward trend or if it's a blip you can recover from and still get a good grade. You get in a car accident. It's not your fault. You have no control over it happening, but you do get to control your reaction to it. I want to spend a minute on this example. The other day, I met a gentleman at a car show who was not a big fan of my Jeep. He said, "No offense to you, buddy, but my wife's brand new car was just rear-ended by one of these built-up Jeeps, and they did thousands of dollars in damage." He then proceeded to complain about the accident for 15 minutes. He told me how his wife's car was only a few weeks old, how the accident was the Jeep's fault, and how mad he was that the other driver didn't even get a ticket. He was furious that the value of his car would be diminished by what he referred to as a dirty Carfax record. He told me that he had no intention of taking what the insurance company offered and that he would sue someone for the depreciated value of his wife's car. He was visibly upset as he spoke. And I get it. I'd be unhappy too if someone rear-ended my wife's brand new car. But I also couldn't help but notice that even days after the accident, he was still letting it bother him. Here he was at a fun event, and this guy was still agitated about something that had happened days ago. Instead of wiping the dog stuff off and moving on with his life, he was carrying it around with him, with all its stink, and it was still having a negative impact on him and, frankly, now me. I see this a lot in sports, too. A player will have a rough at-bat. Maybe they strike out or ground out early in the game. Then this normally awesome player struggles for the rest of the game. They just can't seem to shake it off. I don't know what's going on in their head exactly, but I can imagine them at the plate saying to themselves, "Don't strike out again, don't strike out again. Do better than last time," or "I have to make up for my mistake," something like that, right? This kind of self-talk does not serve them well. They're so focused on not doing poorly that they manifest another bad at-bat. Then they take the dog stuff with them into the field and they make errors. They've metaphorically stepped in dog stuff and the smell impacts their performance. If they could just find a way to get that dog stuff off of their cleats and the stink of it out of their nose, they could play like their first at-bat never happened. I used to be really guilty of this when I worked in an office. I would have a bad day at work and I would come home angry or frustrated, and this would be my family's experience of me. Irritated, annoyed, grumpy. It was so unfair to the people I love. They hadn't seen me all day, and their first experience of me sometime after 5 o'clock was not a good one. Sure, I would eventually calm down and move past the work stuff, but I'd carried that dog stuff in the house with me, and it wasn't just affecting me in a negative way, but everyone else too. It got so bad that I finally put a sign on the door for myself to read every day. It read, "You're not at work anymore, so leave your problems outside this door." And it worked. It served as a reminder that all the stuff I had been dealing with at work did not need to come home with me, and that it was up to me to decide if I was going to let that stuff bother me in my home and around my family. Of course, it's a little more challenging with everyone at home right now. I will occasionally shout profanities from my office, not remembering that my family is within earshot, and there have been plenty of times when I've dragged the stuff from my home office right into the living room where everyone else is negatively affected. It's something I'm still working on. And this dog stuff analogy, it's kind of perfect, right? It really does paint this picture of how you can decide to deal with the bad things that life throws your way. In the moment, it definitely stinks, especially if the dog ate something particularly nasty. But that's life, right? There isn't a thing we can do about it. Stuff is gonna happen, people. But we get to decide if we're gonna clean it off our shoes and get back to a place of happiness and positivity, or if we're gonna drag it with us, allowing it to stink up our lives and the lives of those around us. And so I challenge you. Get out a Sharpie and write "dog stuff" on your wrist. Then when stuff inevitably happens to you, you'll be reminded to make the decision to get past it, to not let it affect you, to not even think about it for another minute, let alone hours or days. Step up to the plate with clean shoes, knowing that you left the problems of the past in the past. Let me know what happens when you implement this lesson by sharing with me personally or sharing on social media using the hashtag #EverydayLessonsEveryday. If you like this podcast, please share with your friends and family. Let's get the word out there and see if together we can make the world a better place. I'll see you next time. Now go out there and do something awesome.